Hi, and welcome to another episode of InstaVision. I'm Glenn Reynolds, and I'm here in the palatial PJTV studios in Washington, D.C. I'm joined by somebody who really needs no introduction, but it's not like that's going to stop me. I'm joined by Jonah Goldberg. He's editor-at-large at the National Review. He's a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and he's the author of Liberal Fascism, a book that certainly had a lot of influence. But it's not a bearded Spock universe, but I'm living in a bearded Jonah universe now, I see. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I've moved, I think, pretty much to the full-time goatee. The sign that I'm moving to it is that I have to update my column picture to have the goat on it. Actually, it's a Van Dyke, it's not a goatee.
Oh, excuse me, that's a very important distinction. So we've had like the Schwarzenegger story, we've had nonstop Weiner coverage, we had the attempt to find something in the Sarah Palin emails where they put more journalists on that story than they put on Obama's whole candidacy. Are we just in the political silly season now?
Oh, I think so. I mean, what was it, Pigpen in the Peanuts cartoons? Had that storm following him wherever he went, right? Or that cloud of dust, I guess what it was, right? That's Sarah Palin. She brings the silly season wherever she goes. She turns certain bloggers into gynecological spelunkers. She makes the Washington Post go crazy. She's basically, I don't know, 30% of the business model of MSNBC. And so it's unfair to sort of peg the silly season, what's going on with Sarah Palin, because she just makes certain people crazy, and that's why, at minimum, you have to love her for her enemies. But yeah, no, I think, this is one of these things where it's, what do they call it in climate change or climate studies? Forcing, where you force certain climate patterns by human activity. You cannot have a story like Anthony Weiner, right, where a guy named Weiner is going around tweeting pictures of his junk around all over the place, talking about his wiener, lying about it like this, and not force a silly season front to come in over Washington. It's just going to happen. And so the reality is that it's a little early for Washington to be silly season. Usually it comes more like August.
Right.
But it seems that there's some climate change going on.
Yeah, the Weiner story reminds me of that old Onion headline. It said, Lou Gehrig dies of Lou Gehrig's disease, and the quote from Lou Gehrig was, "With my name, it was only a matter of time."
Right.
I guess with Anthony Weiner, it's like it. But there's an even better story, and I know you wrote a column on this, which is the Gay Girl in Damascus blog,
right,
which turns out to be not written by a lesbian in Damascus, but by a middle-aged guy in Scotland, right?
Right. He's actually from Georgia. He's a permanent college student living in Scotland right now.
Big lefty.
He looks, he's a peacenik guy. The picture from the Washington Post basically looked like Zach Galifianakis with a Che Guevara t-shirt on. I mean, it was sort of perfect. And there's a connection here with the Weiner thing for just a second, in that Weiner may be the first real sex scandal where he didn't even get laid, right? I mean, this is all virtual narcissistic nonsense.
So his name should be Loser, not Weiner.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. I mean, at least Bill Clinton got some action.
Exactly.
And so my favorite thing about, as you mentioned, I wrote this LA Times column about the gay girl in Damascus who served as this sort of perfect, sort of ultimate contradiction solver, where she was a very left-wing, anti-George Bush, anti-America, anti-Israel, lesbian, cosmopolitan type who had no problem wearing the hijab and claimed that she encountered so much more bigotry in the United States than she ever did in the Middle East.
Right.
And of course, it was written by this white dude who doesn't live in the Middle East and was just completely lying about everything. And if that wasn't a good enough story, it then turns out that within 24 hours after I wrote the column, the lesbian web editor who helped out this guy, Tom McMaster.
That's from lesgetreal.com.
Right. She is the editor of lesgetreal.com, and it turns out that she's not a real les. It turns out that she is a 58-year-old white dude living in Ohio who had assumed his wife's personality, although she's not a lesbian, and was one of the people who promoted the Gay Girl in Damascus as a great lesbian talent. And it turns out in the Washington Post coverage of this that the two would flirt online with each other, thinking the other one was a real lesbian, when it was really two loser white guys sitting in their basement offices, flirting with each other, imagining the other one was a lesbian. It's a great story.
If you wrote a novel with this, nobody would believe it. It would be over the top. Magical realism would sort of be the best tag you could hope for, and yet here you are.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Weiner scandal being about a guy named Weiner. I mean, it's too perfect.
Reality is too heavy-handed. It doesn't have the artistic light touch.
That's right. I mean, that's the one thing that reality has over fiction is it doesn't have to worry about being believable.
So, are there any lesbians who aren't middle-aged white guys, or are lesbians themselves just like a huge practical, kind of like Santa Claus, where there's a lot of middle-aged white guys everywhere pretending all the time? And
Well, it used to be this joke when I was, 14, I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body. It turns out this is a very serious condition out there.
Apparently.
And, you want to make, all these profound points about it, but at the end of the day, there's a sort of, res ipsa loquitur thing about it. I mean, it is what it is,
Awesome. It's just awesome. Well, actually, to get a little more serious, one point you made in your column about Gay Girl from Damascus was that she existed in part because so many people just wanted to believe in somebody like that she was the perfect sort of vindication for their worldview, and they were just desperate to believe in her as being that something other than what she/he turns out really to be. Do you think there's a Barack Obama metaphor there? Because an awful lot of people were awfully anxious to believe in him as something other than really what he is. I mean, they wanted to believe that he was this magical figure that was going to reconcile our divisions, and that he was this big pragmatist who just happened to have a lot of lefty cant in his background, but that he possessed incredible talents of rhetoric and leadership, and the oceans were going to stop rising, and everybody's going to love each other and all. And well, how's that work out?
Not too good. I think there's a lot to that. I think that there's a the true definition of a charismatic figure is someone who allows you to impose your own expectations on them without much help, right? And Barack Obama. It was so obvious that Barack Obama was that kind of figure, that his whole persona was, people of Earth, stop your bickering, I'm here to help. And you had all of the mainstream media types in 2000. I mean, it's funny, just the other night I was listening to David Axelrod do the pregame for the GOP debates, and he was talking about how Barack Obama was scrutinized more than any president in modern American history. And I was like, really?
Yeah,
which
really?
The same guy I'm thinking of? And I think that there is this tendency, particularly on the left, but it exists very much on the right too, to ascribe to personalities magical powers. I mean, it's another form of magical realism. It's one of my chief complaints, particularly in retrospect, but also at the time, about George W. Bush was he played on this sort of white identity politics thing, not in a racist way, but in a sort of, I'm one of you, so therefore I don't have to explain my arguments very well kind of way. And Obama plays on that in his own way, simply by being who he is. You have all sorts of people who think it's outrageous that you question him in any way.
It's racist.
And it's racist, that's right. You two are worse than Hitler if you question his tax plan. And so I think we're it's like that Star Trek, where Captain Kirk becomes an American Indian, and then all of a sudden they think he's a god, and then they cut his hand, and behold the god who bleeds, and all of a sudden you have a real danger in these kinds of things where you can lose the second the magical persona is gone. You kind of just look like this guy pretending to be something you're not. And I think that we're in that phase now with Obama in a big way. It hasn't saturated too much on the mainstream liberal side, although on the hard left, with types like Glenn Greenwald and those kinds, you can really see that they've had enough with the idea that simply because he's Barack Obama, it's okay to do everything that George W. Bush was doing, but just much more.
I must say I'm having a lot of fun rubbing their noses in that too. It's because it is actually amazing all the Bush policies that Obama is carrying forward or expanding. I mean, the FBI is getting more authority to search through people's trash and things. It's just, all the stuff that if Bush were doing it would be terrible. And it's just...
I mean, to watch Al Franken out there talk about how we basically need to cram through renewal of the Patriot Act, I mean, it's great stuff, We
are living in the age of absurdism. Well, sort of exit question here. if people are watching this, I mean, laughter is, of course, the best medicine, and there is plenty to laugh at. And I've actually argued that one of the ways to deal with sort of overweening political figures is, in fact, to laugh at them and mock them a lot.
Absolutely.
Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think that that mockery, and I think this also goes for the war on terror. I think we should be laughing at people like Osama bin Laden, well, not Osama bin Laden anymore. I mean, stupid guy, look at him now. But I think mockery is important. I mean, I don't necessarily think it should be cruel in all circumstances. I mean, Anthony Weiner gets it, but. It's also the sign of a healthy, truly republic. It's a sign of healthy republicanism in the small r sense that we can, that we don't deify and divinize our political leaders. Barack Obama did a lot of that, elevating himself as this guy who's going to ride in on a unicorn and solve all of our problems, and we are the ones we've been waiting for, and all of the rest. And there's still that great website, Is Barack Obama the Messiah? And I think that we are long overdue for some healthy mockery of Obama and our political leaders and all the rest. I mean, SNL is still lagging behind, but it's a sign of a healthy society that does not glorify its political leaders too much.
Well, I think you're right. And I think that one of the interesting grassroots phenomena I'm seeing is as the new bills come out, dollar bills and whatever, with Tim Geithner's signature on them, people are just inking in the word tax cheat over the signature and sending it out there. I mean, I think that's sort of well, if he were a Republican, people would be writing dissertations now on sort of grassroots resistance to moneyed power and all of that. But it's still fun, and I think there are going to be a lot of excellent mockery opportunities over the next couple of years. And
I think there are, and in a bipartisan sense, to be sure. I think the Republican debates are going to be, the Republican primaries are going to be fairly target-rich as well. But
I'm sure. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here. It's great to have you here again, and thanks to all of you for tuning in and listening to us talk about all and sundry. Feel free to mock whoever you want, and you can even mock us in the comments right down there if you like. Was
that your wiener shot?
No, thanks. They're laughing in the control room. I can hear it. Feel free to mock us in the comments even more now. We'll be back next week, and in the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.